Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. In today's program, we will talk about the increasing authoritarianism in Sri Lanka. Extrajudicial killings continue in Papua. India's corrupt officialdom. India's corrupt politicians literally get away with billions. More on that later. Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. Authoritarianism, which is eroding a fragile democracy, has been on the rise in Sri Lanka ever since Mahinda Rajapaksa assumed the presidency of the country. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Dr. Nevi Pillay, has just returned from a fact-finding mission to Sri Lanka, and she had this to say: "I am deeply concerned that Sri Lanka, despite the opportunity provided by the end of the war to construct a new, vibrant, all-embracing state, is showing signs of heading in an increasingly authoritarian direction." Earlier, we spoke with Sri Lanka expert Basil Fernando at the Asian Human Rights Commission.
Mr. Fernando, can you describe some of the signs of the authoritarianism you have noticed creeping into the Sri Lankan society?
At least over 150 years in Sri Lanka, what we have had is a system where law was the king. Despite of the fact that this was introduced during a colonial period, the law as the important factor in deciding anything was established, and to put it into effect, the judges were trained, the lawyers were trained, the people themselves got that idea into their head. But now during the last 40 years, with the introduction of the new constitution, what we are trying to do is to make the king, the president, the law. So anything can be law. So the entire certainty about the law and things being decided by the law, the trust in the court as places where the law will ultimately win, all this very drastically and rapidly disappearing. That is why the statement of the High Commissioner Nevi Pillay, that there is an increasing authoritarianism, is a fact which has been observed by the Asian Human Rights Commission almost on a daily basis, making comments about it for at least last 15 years.
Can you talk about some of the consequences of this?
Well, everything is in chaos. The rule of law takes huge precautions to ensure that police will prevent this kind of thing. Of course, despite of prevention, on rare occasions it can happen. But then there is a complaint mechanism. You go to the police and you complain, and then immediately an inquiry begins. The inquiry has enough evidence, the accused will be arrested, he will be brought to a court, there will be a trial, he will be given chance to defend himself, and at the end if it is proved, he will be punished. None of these things are happening. So imagine a society where these things cannot happen. So people are not protected from crime. See, the essential element of a governance is to make people safe that they can go on their business on their own. They are safe from their own neighbors or others doing harm to them, and they are safe from government doing harm to them. Now, if that atmosphere is absent, imagine the consequences of all this. Then with that, the violence, people resort to violence as the way to defend themselves, because everybody knows the crime does not carry a consequence, and the policing system has collapsed, the judicial system has lost respect. So how do you live in a society like this?
This sounds like very worrying signs. What can be done to stop this?
It is the role of the government that matters now. The first is to taking steps to bring the law back. So the measures should be taken to strengthen the police, so that they do not have to be worried about politicians and others when they do their work. And the attempt should be given to retrain and to re-strengthen them, give the necessary financial backing, the resources, above all the political and the moral backing, saying that you are free to do your work, nobody is going to interfere with this. Same message should go to the judges. Judges should not feel that if we do something that offends the government, we are going to be in trouble. So, everybody knows this is nonsense. So, whether there is the will within the government and will within the people to demand this.
That was Basil Fernando at the AHRC office earlier. The Asian Human Rights Commission has received information regarding the shooting of a Papuan man in Nabire, Papua. The victim, Martin Gobay, was shot in the head during the night of September 5. The identity of the shooter is yet to be confirmed, but there are allegations that the shooting was carried out by the police. According to a local activist who interviewed the family of the victim, Martin Gobay was drunk and escorted to his home by a police officer in the evening of September 5. Later that evening, Martin left the house for the second time, despite the warning from the police officer that the police may shoot him if he went outside again. The family was unaware on the whereabouts of Martin until the police informed them on the next day that Martin had died and that his body could be found at Sri General Hospital. According to a witness, the police had brought the victim's body to the hospital just after midnight. The family reported that the only injury found on Martin's was a gunshot wound to his head. The request to see an autopsy report was denied, as the doctor said that he does not dare to give it without the consent of the police. The HRC has issued an urgent appeal in the matter to pressure police to investigate the fatal shooting thoroughly and bring the perpetrator to justice. Until now, however, the responsible shooter has not been arrested and suspicions that the police are involved are strong. Shootings by the police as well as violence by state agents are reported to be common, not only in Nabire, but also other parts of Papua. In 2010, the AHRC released footage of 2 members of the Indonesian military torturing indigenous Papuans. Other part of the footage shows the cruel and inhuman interrogation of another Papuan man, in which the military threatened him with a bayonet and scorched his genitals with a burning stick. The perpetrators were later sent to light punishment of 9 to 12 months imprisonment for disobeying orders by a military court, provoking condemnation by a human rights group. For our last item this week, we have a guest in the studio, the Executive Director for the HRC, Mr. Bijo Francis. Mr. Francis, welcome. Mr. Francis, there's been a lot of discussions about corruption in politics in India, yet there's hardly any visible change on the ground. Can you please explain the background?
The reason why there has been no visible change on the ground while dealing with corruption in India is because for no government so far, dealing with corruption or preventing corruption has been a policy. So the policy of the state is to not to deal with corruption. So that is the state policy, and that is the reason why there is hardly any improvement, despite a lot of talk that is happening about corruption, about the horrendous nature of corruption, and so on. So without having a state policy on dealing with corruption, we can't expect any change.
I see. And why is that there are large numbers of politicians in India who are in legislative houses despite having serious criminal charges against them?
For example, we have some of the notorious characters facing allegations of corruption. For example, we have AHRC, who was a former minister, who has been accused of a large number of money that has been siphoned off from the public exchequer, and at the moment as we speak he is in prison. He has been charged with different stages and different levels of corruption allegations. But then by the time it gets to a stage where the investigation is completed and the trial begins, at the very least a decade would go, which means that there would be difficulty in procuring witnesses. There will be tampering with evidences because that is possible. There would be change of political conditions which might even eventually benefit him. So by and large, at the end of the day, when the trial concludes, nobody should be surprised that he being acquitted, despite the fact that there has been an enormous amount of money which is actually missing from the public exchequer. And it is not just an allegation by an NGO or a media, it is an accusation leveled by another constitutional authority, which is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, who has made objection.
So that's quite impartial, the allegation.
Yeah, the allegation is impartial. The figures show that this person is responsible for having the state lose, or the people lose that much amount of money, millions actually, billions actually, being lost from the public exchequer. But then at the end of the day, you can't expect a proper trial, because the system is such that the investigative apparatus is such, or it is such maintained, that today you can't expect anything else other than protracted, delayed, even corrupted trial, and you can't expect anything else other than these people coming back to power. So the problem that we are dealing with in India is not that there is no discussion about corruption. There is discussion about corruption. The problem that we are dealing with India is that there is no discussion about the absence of an independent apparatus, the absence of a justice framework, the absence of a rule of law framework, which can actually deal effectively with corruption. So we have, out of 530 members of parliament in the central cabinet, central parliament, we have about 120, 150 persons who are accused of very serious crimes. It is just not corruption alone. Corruption should not be viewed as just financial corruption. Corruption can be at different levels. You know, when you are accused of a crime, when there are witnesses who are willing to depose against you, but then when your trial is not happening because the investigation report has not yet been filed in court, we have candidates who are ministers, who are members of the parliament, members of the state legislative assemblies, who have been facing investigation for serious crimes like murder, like rape, like arson, for the last 22 years. And if the investigative apparatus has not been able to file a charge sheet in court, it means that the investigative apparatus is not expected to file that charge sheet in court. So you have a system which is so much badly run by purpose, by its own structure, as it is done today, to make sure that these people who maintain authorities of power would remain in the authority as long as and as much as they want.
Yeah. And so in your opinion, what will be the ideal way to address this horrendous problem?
I think central to this issue is the scope, the capacity, the acceptance of the possibility of an individual to make a complaint if there is an allegation against A, B, and C, irrespective of the fact that whether that person is a politician or a minister or just an ordinary individual. At the moment, what we have is that complaint making is not encouraged, and the apparatus where these complaints need to be registered are by and large state police. State police is not expected to function the way police as an institution should be allowed to function in a democratic state. It better suits to serve the power, the influential people, the powerful and the influential people, the politicians, the policy of the political parties, and so on. So as long as we have a policing system which do not encourage making and accepting of complaints, which do not is incapacitated to investigate crimes, as it is independently supposed to investigate crimes as it is in the law, and if they are not allowed to do that, and if they are not expected to do that, then we have a problem. The change that is happening, the discussion that is happening, is all about corruption, but then the adjustment, the change, the reform that is happening is not at the place where it should actually happen. It should be actually happening at the level of investigative apparatuses on police, on judiciary, on prosecution. But there we don't have any changes. We are just gerrymandering the issue. We are just glossing over the issue. And we still don't have an establishment, an independent establishment, including the police, which is actually which can actually expect the kind of result that it is supposed to deliver. So we have a lot of discussion, but no result.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis, for your valuable insight on this matter.
Thank you very much.
That is all for this week's Human Rights Asia Roundup. Thank you for joining us and hope to see you again next week.